Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 RCM Trends and Challenges briefing. I'm your host, Dan Murdoch, and we're about to be very busy unpacking the major trends and challenges that will dictate financial success for healthcare systems in 2025 and beyond. What makes this even more special is that this is research that was specifically curated for Athena Health customers and brings a lot of important correlation and operational parallels to the findings for our audience today. And I'm joined by an esteemed panel here. We have Tennille Lizarraga from ApolloMD and John LaChapelle from Adonis. We'll be weighing in on these topics and much, much more. Again, as I mentioned before, we're unveiling recently completed research for the very first time that represents findings from over 80 finance operations and revenue executives across the country. Let's transition next into learning a little bit more about our panelists. Tennille, if you would mind, please kick off and share us a little bit about you and your role at Apollo MD.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Tennille Lizarraga. I'm the EVP of Revenue Cycle Operations at ApolloMD. I've been there since 2006, so I've seen a lot of change in the industry at Apollo and for ApolloMD. And I've been doing medical revenue cycle for almost 30 years now.
Incredible. John, why don't you go ahead next?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Dan. So John LaChapelle, Director of Revenue Cycle here at Adonis. Spent about the last 15 years of my career in this space. Um, Based in the Boston area, particularly worked for Boston Medical Center, where I was the Director of Revenue for the Department of Surgery, and then transferred from there to the Director of Revenue Cycle Strategic Solutions at Boston Children's Hospital, where we really focused on bringing in the early stages of automation via Epic into the rev cycle space to really improve processes and alleviate some log jams from day-to-day work. Um, Love working here. Came to Adonis recently, and have been loving the journey and helping build something truly amazing.
Jonathan and Tennille are being very, very humble. They're both seasoned vets in RCM, and we're certainly really pleased and honored to have them join us today and share their insights. Let's transition next into the topics at hand, reflecting on 2024. The research found that of the top challenges that RCM teams are experiencing, number one, denial, mitigation, and remediation. Two, frequent changes in payer adjudication rules or payer contract relationships. And three, challenges in keeping up with AR backlog. These are very, very challenging, highly nuanced, large issues that have so much attached to them. Why don't we turn to you first? Do those findings, A, surprise you? And B, of course, you can pick any one of those three things and probably go on for 30 minutes about why it's particularly challenging within your context, but feel free to pick any one of those and we can, of course, let the conversation flow from there.
Yes, this resonates very well with me. This is literally what I wake up thinking about every single day. Probably not in this order, but I will say that frequent changes to payer adjudication rules and payer contract relationships roll down to denial, mitigation, and remediation, which also then causes challenges in keeping up with your backlog. So it's all hand in hand and relative. So, I think one of the biggest challenges is the payer adjudication rules and the way that they just, it's like playing literally a ping pong game. It's like today it's this, tomorrow it's that, today, and so on and so forth. So I always say, every day I wake up, like, what changed today? Because as soon as you think you know all the rules to the game, it's over. There's a whole new set coming down the pike. So yeah, I'm definitely aligned with these. And internally, we see about 4 million patients a year. So imagine what AR backlog looks like to us and denial mitigation looks like to us. And that's the volume is one of the biggest challenges that we have, which we'll probably get into more, talks about how the solutions and the platforms and intelligence help us with that. But yeah, volume and then just keeping up with which payer is doing what today is our biggest challenge.
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of that sentiment. For me, the one that stands out is always the frequent changes to like the payer adjudication rules. These are things in historically like places I've worked, we've gone into paths of specific teams that tackle this based on region, specific payer types. We would review monthly newsletters to try to pull out specific areas that would apply to our team and apply certain rules and logic to our systems to help mitigate these risks in advance. But even then, a lot of times you're still a month behind because those come out at the end of the month, and that change was released at the beginning of the month. So I think as we start to think of like going down this path of how we can really diminish these changes and these paths of destruction, I like to call them, we can truly think about like how do we always stay one step ahead and have that information spoon fed to us instantaneously and allow it to be built logically into like how we approach everything we do every single day. And all these things like even the way it's ordered here, denial mitigation, frequent changes, and then keeping it, those are all just cyclical, right? Like it's in order. One affects the other, affects the other, and we're just constantly trying to stay one step ahead and staying on top of each and every one of these is our ultimate goal and why we're here and what we do every single day.
Yeah, the interrelated nature of each of these components and how they're sort of natural prerequisites to one another, as Tania was mentioning, when one fails, the other fails, and it's sort of this domino effect of sorts. There were other challenges that, of course, were raised over the course of these findings, inclusive of inefficiencies in non-clinical workflows, lack of system or data integration, underpayment detection, and high-level reporting or unactionable insights. Are there any number of those that sort of stand out to you above and beyond what we just mentioned? Underpayments has been something that's been
Yeah.
quite a theme for us on our end. Perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah, underpayments is because it has always been a thing, right? Because it's part of identifying where are you maximizing your collections and your revenue. But over the past, I would say, 5 years, it has become a major, major topic of conversation in revenue integrity. Are we actually getting paid what we should be getting paid? And the carriers have gone from just flat out denying, which is very obvious, right? It's very easy to identify denials because there's no money attached to them. And there's usually, some type of remark code or some type of anti-code that lets you know and identify that. And now they've switched over to, well, we're going to pay you something, not quite what you're expecting based on what you build, and hope you don't pick it up, right? Or you don't pick it all up because it's happening at such a rapid pace. Um, and with the volume, it can hide. So, yes, underpayments have become one of my top priorities. I've been speaking about it for 72 hours with my internal team and some of the Adonis team actually, with emails flying back and forth as we speak. It's a huge priority. It is a very, very big hole in our revenue. And if we just allow it to occur, the carrier wins and we're eventually the loss is going to be so big, we're not going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, and I again agree, Tania. We're finding it, not only with you all and your work, but other customers across the board. This new trend of downcoding that we're seeing, it's just consistent, and it's some of the largest payers out there are continuously not even putting in remarks as to why they're doing it. They're just, you build at level 5, we're going to pay you at level 4, and we're going to remit you at level 4. And so I think being able to surface those, and as you said, those things can easily hide in the weeds, and being able to get those to pull out and find them is obviously, very near and dear to us here at Adonis and things that we're helping surface. And I think that's ultimately the goal, is to like mitigate that risk. But the other thing that stands out to me here in these talking points are really around the kind of the tie of inefficiencies in the non-clinical workflows, but also looking at the lack of system of data and integration. And I think those two can sometimes be kind of joint together. We get to a point now where there's so many tools and systems out there that it's one solution for one problem versus having like a holistic approach. And I think getting to that holistic approach using an orchestrated effort of tools across the board is something that this world needs to shift to, and I think is a world we're going to shift to. And I think we can really make operational efficiencies as a result of that, no matter what work stream we're going down, if we can orchestrate the right tools from the right players and have it all centralized in one location to have that holistic approach coming from one place. And it minimizes the integration touch points. It really makes for an improved work stream and efficiency upstream, I guess I would say in that as well.
Yeah, I would agree completely, John, on that. I think that, and that's what we're looking for currently. That's what we're building and working towards, is having kind of like that one place that tells us all the things, right? When we're doing good, when we're doing bad, where we're doing bad, when did it start? Did we resolve it? Is it still happening? You know, so and reporting and integration, all of these things could be number one, right? I mean, if you could put all the things at number one, all of these things, in my opinion, would be number one, because it's what we work on every day. Better reporting, better data, and actionable data, not just
Yeah,
a bunch of data. And I think historically, people have equated data to good, right? It's great if you do something with it. Like if the data is
yeah,
actually telling you something, it's usable. And not everybody's a data scientist or analytical mindset. So presenting it in a way that makes it actionable is super important to all levels of staff and team members.
yeah. I love that how you put that with like the actionable insights because I feel like that's one of the things like in my history in this world of we could surface a problem, but
Hmm.
that problem could have any number of solutions within it, right? Like when you have a specific denial code that's out there that's causing you this pain point, it could mean five different things, and you don't know which of those five things you're going after. And to me, like getting to that next level of like the remark that really clarifies the problem
Hmm.
is something that like creates the true actionable path forward. And I think that's oddly something that like until recent has not started to really be something people did. It was like, oh yeah, you have a problem with authorization denials, or it could be out of network, or and it's like, well, that's just one denial code that covers all of those. So
Correct.
getting to that understanding of the next level and like what's the path to success is one thing I know like we're doing and working towards very well here, but
Mm.
I'm amazed that it took till now that we're starting to see that come out in this space.
Yep. Cark and Marks, very important combination.
No doubt. And I think the
Yeah.
collateral damage of all of this is burdens on our team's time, right? And depending upon what day of the week it is and what's the flavor of the week and the most challenging, biggest burning fire depends on where that team's energy is focused. One of the things
Mhm.
that the research surfaced was that on average, teams are spending more than 10 hours a week blocking and tackling against denial, mitigation, and management. And so I think that could be very much true of a lot of these categories of challenges, but maybe we can get to the root cause of why that's the case. Why is there so much? Why
Mhm.
is there over 20% of the week on average being spent on just the manual intervention that's associated with denials? And I imagine a lot of it has to do with what you mentioned before, Tania, with uh, the playing field changing week to
Yeah.
week on the payer
Yeah.
adjudication side. But maybe you could
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on that, Tania, if you could.
Well, I mean, it's very important for us to, we have to block and tackle. We probably spend more than that blocking and tackling our denials here at Apollo MD. A, because we have so many. B, because we're totally geographically split. So you can't just find an answer to one blue issue and then just apply it across the board. Geographically, the blues are very different. The Medicares are different depending on the MAC regions. So, just to reflect back on something that John mentioned earlier, getting ahead of the carriers, like getting one step ahead, that's not even my goal, because I don't even think, and this has no, this is not a personal statement against you, John. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's a reality. I don't think any of us will ever be ahead of the carrier, because the carrier gets to make the rules up as we go. So my goal is to be as closely behind them as we possibly can. And if that means like the next day, then that's my goal, right? If that's possible. Like they changed the rule on Monday and we know it on Tuesday. Uh-oh, red flag, Blue Cross is no longer doing this. Now they're doing this. So yeah, it really that's my goal. Like how can we get smart enough to stay right behind the carrier at all times? Because what happens is if you let too much time go from the rule change to identification to resolution, we're losing money. We're losing money. And then every moment lost or time spent diminishes the actual return that we're fighting for. So we may still be getting $100 on that claim, but we spent 50 to get it. So technically now we're only really getting 50. So we're not maximizing our revenue. So that's really where like my mindset goes when we're looking at all of these resolution paths and technology advancements in revenue cycle. How do I maximize every single dollar?
Yeah, no, I agree, and you're right. It is a we're just chasing the payers everywhere we go, right? And
It's sad.
how and it's rare. Like there's been rare instances where we'll get like in April a newsletter that says in June we're going to stop accepting the CPT code because most of the time it's well we're in June and oh as of June 1st we no longer accept this, and then
Correct.
you're like and it's you know I always said when I first started the committee of like payer tracking in my hospital days, I would love to have this ability to just read every website with an automated process and like feed that information to me. And that's something actually like we're starting to see now. And that's something that like we're looking to integrate into our world here at
Mhm.
Adonis. And again, but to your point, that still gets us just a little less behind them.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we can make this rule based off this code set for you and like build in a custom scrubber. We can not allow this to go out with this and make a recommendation on that. But we ultimately are doing that in a reactive state. And we're getting as close to proactive as humanly possible without actually ever getting to the proactive state.
Yeah. That's how I see it too. And then also, when they say they're going to do something and then they don't do it, and then they do it 3 months later. So you
Yeah.
kind of like you're like, well, do I put the new rule in place? Do I do the new CPT code now? Or, because then it's going to get denied for 3 months. Like it's just a really hard game to play with the
Mm-hmm.
carriers. Which we seem to enjoy because we're still here years,
Yeah.
like decades in. We
Yeah.
love it. But yeah,
It's no day's the same, which is one thing I'll say is
very
lovely in this
true.
space. Yeah.
Very true.
Exactly. And I think what is then the byproduct of potentially having the majority of your human capital deployed in certain areas of time? I think that there's this interesting concept of how can we focus our team's energy on the single most valuable activity that can be focused on? And I'd be curious to get both of your guys' perspective on, how do you establish a path to getting closer to that so that you can create a little bit of equilibrium or let's say more predictability to Neil, as you mentioned, like how can we make sure that our energy and focus and tactics are focused on the right thing at the right time to drive the right economic outcome for us? Be curious about what your journey has looked like to date, because I think a lot of organizations are experiencing, this slippage in revenue.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we could talk about the dimensionality of that all day long, but curious as to how you have thought about and deployed that sort of mentality or that strategic focus to your teams.
Well, we have like the more complex back end denials that we put more of our skilled and seasoned reps on, which are usually our recons and our appeals because they actually require some discernment on, what do I need to say in my reconsideration to provide the support appropriate for this denial. So our recons and appeals, which I'm not going to say we're not interested in automating because we would love to automate if we can, because some of our recons, especially for the auto down codes, are very redundant. So I'm definitely speaking with folks at Adonis on if that's a possibility for us to work towards doing auto reconsiderations for redundant tasks through portals too, right? So then you're going direct. Um, and then also, I think one of our other pain points that I would love to see if we can get some type of automation in is our eligibility information. So I think it's one of our biggest pain points outside of underpayments and downcoding is eligibility related denials. And really, the 271 has all the data that you need. But if you're not reading it appropriately or utilizing it appropriately, again, because your data connections or integrations aren't syncing up appropriately all the time, it's causing a lot of downstream denials. Um, so those are some things that I would like to move out of the manual intervention so that I could have more people focused on the ones that need reconsiderations and appeals. Um, and use technology to free up my skilled set of folks for those types of denials.
And when you say eligibility, it's funny you bring this up very timely because this is a project I'm working on intensely here. Do you find it's like I know there's a myriad of issues that can come from all of this, but are you finding it's like specific plan types that have specific requirements around pre-certs or authorizations? Is it like certain services aren't covered for certain areas? I just love to learn more on because
it's a
I'm
little bit
working
of
on like that approach as well.
it's a little bit, with being ED, pre-certs are not really high
Yeah,
on the totem pole for us, except of course for Optum VA,
yeah,
which by the way, we just deployed our agents, so loving that. The AI agents on that. So it's our first initiative to taking AI into the rev cycle. But eligibility, we see kind of like there's a couple of different facets. So there's demographic
hmm,
mismatches, which cause denials. Patient's name
yeah,
is misspelled. They have the middle name. We don't. Date
yeah,
of birth is off by, the registrar fat fingered it at registration. Um, One of the biggest pieces, though, I would really love to get right from an eligibility perspective is plan types. So
yes,
we do a lot of reporting on plan types. We do a lot of next steps on plan types for claims. And if we misrepresent a patient as a Medicare replacement versus a traditional Medicare or commercial, right? They may have a commercial blue, but we've put them into a blue advantage bucket. So now we're not even like maybe looking at those patients in the workflow for the commercial Blue Cross if we have something set up for that. Also, when we do our payer mix, right? When you were trying to do our collectability rates, knowing having the most accurate plan type data at the patient level is so important for almost every facet of our business. Performers, when we're bidding business in certain locations, they like to use one hospital as a payer mix comparison. But if we're misrepresenting, it can throw the whole performer off. And now they're looking at me and going, well, why didn't we collect all this money? And I'm like, well, because we misclassified a Medicaid commercial as commercial, right? And
yeah.
we applied a commercial rate to it instead of a Medicaid rate. So for me, one of the biggest points of getting eligibility right is really plan types.
And that's actually the perfect segue to what I was, I was hoping we'd go down into,
Look at the
because that
synergy.
yeah the approach I'm thinking of is like historically it's I've worked in a lot of epic places, right? So it's been we run eligibility 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours, day of leading
Mhm.
up to the thing, and we still have eligibility issues. And plan types being one of the largest because you can submit to Aetna, but it could be any number of the Aetna products. You could submit to
Correct.
wherever it is.
Yeah, or
Um,
Cigna. That's Cigna,
yeah, any of those,
yeah.
the nationals are going to get
Yep.
you with their just endless supply. And my thinking is like, how do we flip that script? Like you brought up the AI agents and like that agentic
Mhm.
approach we're starting to dive into in this world. And like, how do we leverage that into like eligibility checks? What's the script we can write to like validate the plan type on the
Yeah.
front end via an agent? And that's the path I'm starting to think of it in. Is what's our success rate with mitigating
Right.
eligibility denials in that space? Um, and the plan type in particular, which I was very excited you again brought up in this
Yeah.
point here.
I'm an old school mindset, so I'm always like, did you pick up the phone? Did you pick up the
Hmm.
phone? Like when
Exactly.
anybody comes to me and they're like, well, I can't figure it out, and I checked the portal and I checked the EOB, and I'm like, did you pick up the phone? Right? Let's go old school AR 101. Pick up the
Yep.
phone. For this particular initiative, I think picking up the phone, I mean, picking up the phone is always the best option, but it should always be the last option without AI, because AI
Hmm.
makes the call feasible, it's
Exactly.
economical, right? But if we could figure out how to dissect the 271, right, and understand and read it appropriately and accurately, like 95% of the time, I think that's the better way to go
Yeah.
first. And
Hmm.
then you layer on top of that for the 5-10% that's not getting accurately read, the AI agents.
Yeah.
That's the way I
No,
would think about it.
and I think that's another. I actually love that approach as well, and thinking through that, and would love to actually work together, you and I, on that, to
Hmm.
see what we can do there.
Oh yeah, I would
But
love it.
I think that's I think of like sort of the large language model processing type stuff that can read through those and understand the plan types. It's funny. I think back to like my early Athena days when I was working in hospitals in the outpatient setting with Athena. And I remember to select the right payer back then for the eligibility checks, you actually had to find like the correct member phone number on the card. So like it could have been 100 United plans in there, and you had to actually
Hmm.
find the one that had the member services number that matched your member services number on your card to pick the right plan type. And I feel like we've sort of aggregated that all into like one really lump sum. And I think
Hmm.
while it may feel more efficient, in the end, it created downstream impacts that I don't think were ever, we never went back to
Considered.
revisit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Absolutely.
think we got away from that like very manual process at the beginning, which created a very manual process in the end. And no one came up with that fix across the board. And I think that's a really like great approach, is to try to solve it on both ends at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
I think thematically what this speaks to is payers are a pain. We want to
Yes.
find paths to resolving that pain.
Hmm.
And we're all like in this universal ship together as it
Hmm.
relates to RCM teams experiencing the same challenges. The question is
Hmm.
again, what is the solution? Many organizations, including ApolloMD, are turning to AI, right? Turning
Hmm.
to technologies that are going to help execute across jobs to be done in the hopes that if you resolve enough jobs to be done, there's a compounding effect to that that increases success on submission of claims, that increases success of denial mitigation and management, increase all the things that we've already mentioned. Based on the survey, it looks like in 2024, a little above 20% of organizations providers were using AI technologies across various contexts and jobs to be done. In 2025, that number is expected to increase into the mid 40s. So almost a doubling of those who are going to be
Wow.
adopting or investing in this type
Wow.
of technology. Tennille,
Yeah.
you had already mentioned you guys are taking an agentic AI approach to some of these solutions. Of course, we're proud to be partnered with you in that capacity. And of course, you're a Athena Health customer as well. Talk to us a little bit about A, what sort of led you down that path, and B, what is sort of the solution to that, and where are you getting started?
So, prior to Athena, we were on IDX, which was also a very segmented billing platform. So every one of our TINs was like its own little entity in its own little world. And then we moved on to Athena, and it was an enterprise platform. And I was very excited. I said, "Oh, wow, okay, fine. We're going to have everything in one place. I can cross report. I can pull data across all of my TINs." And I got, very excited. And as we progressed into putting all of our tins onto the platform, and when we first migrated over in 2016, we probably had maybe, I don't know, 90 tins that were moving over. And now we're up to about 130 or so. Um, and it wasn't what I envisioned it to be. Was it easier? Yes, because I could literally pull one report out and it would give me every single piece of my AR in one report, but that's massive, right? And there's only so much a pivot table can do for you. Um, what was missing was a dashboard, like something that I could come into every single day and it tell me and help me navigate through our AR. Where is it sitting? Why is it sitting there? What's new sitting there? What's still sitting there? You know, I needed help to not only surface the problems quickly, but I needed help in then kind of like managing them through the process, right? So I always used to tell people, I need to know where the smoke is before it turns into a raging forest fire, right? And I couldn't. I was always running into a fire, a forest fire. I could never get to it while it was just kind of smoking a little bit, and that's really where I wanted to get to. So my C-suite would always have questions like, "Well, why didn't we know about this sooner? Why didn't you identify this sooner? What is your team doing when they're working these denials?" And and John, from an AR perspective, you have certain AR reps who have a mindset of like, I get here and I get paid to just click, 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 work, 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 claim, work, claim, work, claim, next, next, next. And then you have certain folks who are like, I've done the same thing 150 times today. Maybe I should raise my hand and tell
Yeah.
somebody that there's a problem maybe we can solve holistically, you know, but you don't run into a ton of them. You have more of the worker bees that are just clicking and getting their production number for the day. And, then you don't know that Dr. X is not credentialed somewhere or his number was off by a digit because they're just fixing it on the portal and just going and going and going. So I needed a, a solution to first identify the problems. That was number one. And then as we started partnering with Adonis and lots of conversations flowing back and forth, ideas just started going like, oh, well, if you can tell us this, can you tell us this? And if you can tell us that, can then we do this? Right. And then we just kind of spiderwebbed off of those ideas and conversations. But it all came from our lack of visibility into the AR.
And I to one of the things you said that really resonated with me was like the C-suite coming down and asking, well, how do we not know about this? It's like, well, there was 27,000 claims in there, and believe it or not, we didn't know the exact state of all of them. And I, I think that's something that we still will always kind of tussle with is how do
Mhm.
we understand the state of everything that's happening in our world. Um, but as we think about like how we work together and we iterate on what we offer you and the ideas we can go back and forth on, it's how do we create like these cohorts of specific, like our pending was submitted to payers and like understanding the claim statuses of all of these, and are we truly representing the most up-to-date information from any remittance that's coming back into us? Are we looking at like denials in like this bucketed sense? Like, yeah, we have 9,000 denials, right? Okay, where are they? What's
Right.
the basis of it? What payers? What trends are they having? Is it really heavy on Aetna and Blue Cross of wherever, or is it's really getting our arms around all those, finding the trends, the patterns, and then to bring this really back to the beginning of this conversation, actionable items to take away from that. It's not just like, yeah, we have a bunch of denials. No kidding, we have a bunch of denials. Why are they
Right.
there, and then how can we fix them?
Right.
And
And quickly.
well, and exactly, and like to your point, like it was the same for me in my world. Yeah, there was most problems we figured out, but we figured out 4 to 6 weeks after it started.
Right.
And then now you're just on your heels and you're trying to get that resolved. And versus if we can have that figured out in one day, 2 days, then it's like, well, we can really minimize the risk. We can create the operational improvements and efficiencies that prevent it again, and we
Yep.
can kind of work with that. So, and good, bad, I guess we'll look at both sides of it. Like that world is never going to change. We're always going to have these changes that come in. We're always going to have to make these real
Yep.
time adjustments, and that's what makes what we do so fun and so
That's
interesting every day and keeps us here. But it's also like the world, every step we take, the payers are taking the same step in the opposite direction, and we're just going to keep going down that path. And I do believe that like what we're doing here and with you all is getting us much closer to that direction that they're trying to go, and catching up to them and staying
Yeah.
that, as you said, one step behind them versus
Yeah.
4 weeks behind them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when they turn around, we're there now. We're like, hello,
Yeah, exactly.
we're here. Here we
Absolutely.
are.
They're getting a little more reactionary to us. And
Absolutely.
I think that's something that we haven't dealt with.
What I think is so interesting about the way you positioned that journey to Neil is that it wasn't about, okay, we know that there's this one particular job that we know can be done better, and let's just go deploy and throw AI at the problem. Instead, what you guys did was sort of take a methodical approach of like, let's actually diagnose what's actually happening first and foremost, and then build our roadmap from there. And I think that's really fascinating and might be a bit opposite of how people are particularly thinking about it right now. I
Hmm.
think there is sort of this, we're very much in trend, we're very much in vogue as it relates to like deploying an AI solution. But what does that practically mean? And when
Right.
we look at the data from the research, right, the plans as it relates to the top three areas that RCM teams are intending on deploying AI, claim scrubbing and submission, coding verification, charge entry. But I think the caution here is that yes, those might very well be great areas to deploy this type of capability, but is it the most valuable? Is it the thing that again, is going to have the highest impact and put you in a position to continue to scale capability to you? I think it's like interesting how you took sort of like a platform level approach.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, because part of my goal is also, to your point, scalability. That was a good segue into that, right? Because I'm always challenged with, to know, we need to collect more for less and faster. Those are the three components, right? We want more, we want
Easy.
it faster, and we want it for less. And I'm like, well, I am not a miracle worker, but if I can if I can execute the appropriate technology in the areas that make the most meaningful impact, we can scale. So maybe my FTE calculation goes from, and I'm just going to throw some numbers out there. Currently, for every 50,000 visits, I get an FTE, right? Because that's what my calculator was set up to do. Well, now I want it where for every 100,000, I get one FTE because AI and technology is allowing me to scale at 100% what I'm doing right now or 50%. Um, so that's really one of my goals for 2025 is scalability when it comes to workforce, but also one of my goals for 2025 with AI and technology is to decrease my write-offs, and I'm meaningless write-offs, not appropriate ones, right? We write off a lot of money. This is my death by a thousand cuts reference the other night. If I literally was getting held to the fire for the adjustments that weren't should not have been adjustments, I'd probably have a different life right now. But there's understanding, and we don't have the tools, in place then. So one of my goals for 2025 is reduce my adjustment dollars, increase my revenue dollars, because it should go somewhere. If I'm not adjusting it, it should be in the bank. And doing that by touching more claims using technology, right? I think a lot of my death by a thousand cuts is claims that just don't get touched. They come in, they go out, and they just don't, no one ever touches them.
Yep. And when you say no one ever touches them, you mean like they go through the submission process and then they just get to that
They
submit it to
just
payer acknowledge and
hamster
they
wheel, like,
yeah,
or someone touches them, but they're doing the wrong thing over and over and over again.
yeah.
So allowing
Well,
me
you
to
just
also scale my non-quality reps out, and not
yeah,
have to replace them would be amazing too. I don't look at a lot of claims like on an individual level where I start looking through claim notes and what actually happened. But I promise you, every time I do dive into a claim, it's always like the most incorrectly worked claim ever. And my thought process to my management team is I don't even work claims every day anymore. So if I can assess this claim in less than a minute that it was worked improperly and what should have occurred, that means whoever's looking at this claim is just should not be on our team. That's my assessment. I know it's a little harsh, but if you know AR, you know AR, and you should be working all the claims with the same mindset.
Well, and in a system like Athena, the historical tracking of the touches of that claim are very quantifiable and attainable when you're going through it. So you can truly see like how much or little someone did.
Correct.
Um, and I remember my time in Athena, it was very frustrating at times. I'm like, you were right at the finish line and you decided just not to step over for whatever reason. You just kind of let it sit there.
Yep.
Um, to your like write off perspective, this is something I've been pondering since I worked in the space, and especially since I got here, is like how do we leverage? Because it's really around like timely filing at the end of the day. It's whether it's timely filing on submission, timely filing upon correction.
Right.
It's how do we alert payer by payer like your timely filing workload, and surface those to people and create like meaningful work lists and queues people can go to say like we're gonna work this one first and getting those because of course they can't just have like a timely filing for submission. They can have a one timely
Right. Then
filing
you
for
have the
submission.
reconsideration, you have the
Yeah,
appeal timely filing, and then
so
it's
it's
the
all
clock
that
starts
logic.
over,
Yeah,
you
all
know.
the logic built in around like understanding the status of the claim, where we are in a timely filing perspective, and then
Yeah.
like helping keep an eye on that. And I think that's ultimately like the next goal is to find how do we quantify that for everybody.
Yeah.
And I know something we've been talking about
Yeah.
internally here.
Yeah, and I think this kind of transitions really well into sort of our last topic here, which is, the relationship and the interoperability with your systems of record, your practice management system, your EHR. In this particular instance, we're talking a lot about Athena Health. It has lots of strengths, and it's a wonderful system, but there's
Mhm.
certainly technologies such as Adonis and others out there that are looking to, supercharge that
Yes.
instance with,
Hmm.
the right technologies in the right team's hands to execute the right forms of optimization, particularly within RCM in this context. So, Neil, perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on what that journey has looked like as it relates to adopting a technology such as ours and working in harmony with a system like Athena.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct. Athena has a lot of benefits, has a lot of great working workflows within it. Um, and they do give us analytics. So I don't want to go through this whole thing and as if they do not give us analytics. They do give us analytics. It's the timing of the analytics is really was one of the issues that I had a month after it occurred, right? So bringing Adonis in was more to get us smarter faster in our own AR, help us just be smarter about our own workflows, our own inventory, what's happening, in our house, basically. Um, and I'm excited that you guys are now in the marketplace. And I'm also excited that you guys are working towards being able to be interchangeable with data, like because one of the challenges is having two systems to work claims out of. So I'm completely against it. I've said that from the very beginning. You guys can have 17 work lists, but if my people have to duplicate work, then they're just going to work out of Athena only. But if you guys have the ability to let them work in a more customizable work list approach in Adonis, and all of that gets written right back into Athena at the end of the night. And the reason why that's important is because I'm looking for my PFS reps to understand when a patient calls in later, if that claim makes it to patient responsibility and they have a complaint, they need to be able to see everything that occurred on that claim. And PFS is not going to go into Adonis. They're going to go into Athena. And we need to have a kind of like a record of truth, which Athena has to be that for us, right? That's where our codes go in. That's where the claims are created. I mean, the scrubs happen there. Um, but I think that it's like, it's age old, like work smarter, not harder. I really think that's what it comes down to. we don't want to work hard. Like we work hard. We don't want to work harder. Like we already work hard. But if we can work hard and smarter, we'll be so much more successful. And I definitely look forward to a lot of the things that you guys are working on. There's a ton of things, ton of possibilities and opportunities that you guys have already touched upon in conversations. So that's
There's a
where
lot
we
of white
stand.
space. There's no
Yeah.
there's no doubt about it. And Jonathan, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about like where we're heading and what we're excited about.
Yeah, no, and like there are a lot of things you just said there resonate to our internal discussions on our sort of roadmap moving forward for this year and even looking into next year. Um, and it's to go back to like again the very beginning, sort of that platform base when we think of like the agentic AI and how we can leverage it and um, really making that holistic approach of what we utilize it for. And yeah, like we have the use case with you for like this one workflow right now that we're doing with like the VA aspect, and really exciting. But like, how do we leverage that for all your pain points?
Yep.
And like to your point earlier, like I loved when we were talking about like eligibility, just understanding the 271 better.
Mhm.
And like that can be done through via automation and aspects that don't require necessarily an agentic phone call going out the door. But yeah, there may be a smaller cohort there that. So these are all really great things for us to like really wrap our heads around. Because for me, I'm like maybe we just flip the script and just like be proactive and call the payers and just figure this out right out of the gate.
Mhm.
But it's also that approach of like simplistically, we have the data coming in. We just need a better way of like quantifying what's in front of us. And I don't think anyone has really done that well up to this point. And I think that's something that is a really great path for us to go down um, and help test it out and make it work and
Yeah.
see the impact downstream. And ultimately, if we can't get the answer there, then we have another way of getting the information and leveraging the intelligence platform we have to kind of develop and create these work streams for these agentic approaches.
Yeah.
I think is where like we're going to continue to thrive and flourish in our space, and also help drive business in a really positive direction for you all as well.
Yeah.
And
There's so much. Sometimes I feel like I'm overwhelming everyone when I talk to you guys sometimes because I just like get in front of you guys and I'm like, like let's do this and we could do that and what about this? And it just because there's so much, right? There's just so
Hmm.
much from the very beginning, from coding perspective, because we do AI coding too, right? That
Hmm.
was an initiative we took 4 years ago. Um, and it's really training machines. Like it's almost like downloading like your brain into the machine, right? Because we have all of this in our heads. Like when you see this, it's this. When you do this, it's that. When this, because we've learned all of it. But it's also making sure that we teach the machine appropriately, because when the machine does it does it right 100 miles an hour. But when it does it wrong 100 miles an hour too.
Yep.
So that's one of the biggest challenges that I have, like one of the biggest not hesitancies, because I'm all for moving forward with technology. It's just one of the worries that always is in my head. It
Yeah.
is the machine or the bot or the API call doing it right all the time? And then if it's not, how do we know then? So that's the other identification issue that I would love to talk about, at another time. How do we identify when what we've built goes off the rails?
totally.
Well,
And I think
yeah,
there's
it's
a
all.
crawl, walk,
Oh,
run to this, right? And I
Yeah.
think
yeah.
the thing that we see within the research is 6% of respondents say that they can glean actionable insights off their data today, which is obviously a crazy minority, right, in the grand scheme of things. And it kind of starts there, right,
Yeah.
Tennille? Like,
Yeah.
are you leveraging the data in a way that gives you visibility into what is and is not working? And how does that data then inform where you get started? Right. And so, John, sorry, I know you were going to answer there. I just wanted to throw in
Yeah,
that
no,
nugget.
I was just going to add to that like, yeah, there's all these amazing automated work streams out there, but to your point, like it's a machine and the machine has like orders and it goes down that path and that path sometimes can be wrong. So to me, and this is one thing I've thought of like from day one is like the iterative learning process of true machine learning and understanding the changes in the environment and adjusting accordingly and creating the insights and creating the alerts and giving the recommendations accordingly, and understanding, like, go back to earlier points, like things change rapidly in this
Yeah.
space. And it's like, if we're sending out this code with this modifier for this reason, and it doesn't work for the last 10 days, that can be 5,000 claims in some instances for people. And then the machine did a really good job getting them out quick, but it sent
Right.
out 5,000 incorrect claims really quick. So it's having that truly like repetitive, iterative, it's always staying
Always
up to speed.
teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, always learning.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's the moral of the story, guys. And I want to thank you, Tennille and John, for leading us on this conversation today. This was, we were not kidding. We were going to cover a lot of ground, and we absolutely did so. And we're really excited about sharing the research with everybody that registered for this webinar today. But that's a wrap. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to learn more, feel free to visit us at adonis.io. But until next time, we'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.